Hey guys, this is Maelstrom MTG back again with some Budget Modern. Today we're going to be talking about a really weird deck, and now I know I do a lot of like burn-esque decks on here, but this is kind of weird because it's kind of like you're mixing burn with a little bit of like combo-y shenanigans, but you'll see exactly what I mean. Today we're talking about red-black Hellementals, and it is very exciting. We are staying on budget with $95 on tabletop and $63.67 on MTGO, and we're going to dive right in. Of course, we are Hellementals, so we are going to be combining the aspect of a graveyard deck with elementals. So we're going to hop right in with a Flamekin Harbinger. When it comes into play, you may search your library for an elemental card, reveal it, shuffle your library, and put that card on top of it. So this is going to allow us turn one to make sure that we're able to get exactly what we need. And there are ways that we can abuse this ability. We can reuse it several times, and it's a very powerful card. Which is why it's $9 for the playset. It's very understandable. Next up is Spark Elemental, which is another turn one play. We have a lot of turn one plays in this deck. They're all kind of competing for that turn one play. But they are some fairly good ones. This is one of the ones that you might want to take priority if you know what you're going against and it's a creature deck. Spark Elemental is a 1-drop trample haste. At the end of turn, sacrifice Spark Elemental. Now what this is going to do is it's going to essentially act like a budget lightning bolt. We're also running lightning bolt, but it's not only a budget lightning bolt, it's also an elemental with 1 toughness. And now with the sheer number of creatures with toughness 1 in this deck, or cards available to us with that, I really want to play some sort of deck that runs Tetsuko Umezawa, but it's just not now. That's a different deck. That is a completely different deck. But we do have Spark Elemental as a 1 toughness creature. We have 1 toughness tribal kind of in here, but it's going to act as a lightning bolt essentially. Next up is Hellspark Elemental, which is a 2-drop with the same exact thing, except it also has Unearth. So if our opponent has like no board and then we're like in the late game, we can unearth it to bring it back. We do lose it though. It will be exiled. But we do have something else that can bring these cards back. But I'll talk about that after I talk about this, which is probably one of our biggest cards in the deck, which is Lightning Skelemental, Trample Haste. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, that player discards 2 cards. That is insane, and there's just so much value if you can get in. But then it says at the beginning of the end step, sacrifice Lightning Skelemental. So as you can see, we have 12 creatures here, and they seem like they're really strong, except they all have 1 toughness and they die at the end of our turn. And that's not too bad, but it does make us kind of sad that we're going to lose our creatures. So we do have Thunderkin Awakener. Haste. Whenever it attacks, choose target elemental creature card in your graveyard with toughness less than Thunderkin Awakener's toughness. Return that card to the battlefield tapped and attacking. Sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. I love that this doesn't say exile, because it's like we're flashbacking our creatures, but without them exiling. So it's essentially kind of escape without needing to pay the cost. Now, as you can see, it's a 1/2, which means that any creature with power... Well, with toughness 1 or 0 or -1, I don't know. There might be some out there. Down below in the comment section, let me know if there are any creatures out there with a negative toughness. I know there are with negative power. I think there are some with -1. But are there any creatures out there with negative toughness? Let me know below. But Thunderkin Awakener can grab all of our 1 toughness creatures, Lightning Skelemental being the biggest one of them, but also Hellspark and Spark Elemental are going to be huge ways that we can bring stuff back. If we have Thunderkin Awakener and we need something out of our deck, we can bring back Flamekin Harbinger, and then when we have Flamekin Harbinger enter the battlefield, we can essentially tutor our deck. So any of these creatures in our deck, we are more than okay with bringing back Thunderkin Awakener. Now, we only have 20 creatures in our deck because we are so heavy in kind of a mid-rangey deck. So our creatures are very aggressive, very aggro, but we do want to support them with spells that are going to kind of either bring them back, kill our opponent, or delay our opponent. Now, one of those delay or preventing things we're going to be doing is going to be Inquisition Kozilek. We have the budget to run 3 of these, and honestly, I really like the card. We honestly kind of have the budget to run a 4th, but we don't really need it. But Inquisition Kozilek is going to be there for us to be able to turn 1, make them discard the early play, or even later on if they're a deck that this is highly effective against. Next up, we have Lightning Bolt for removal, as well as it can deal that last bit of damage to them. We aren't running more burn spells because this is not exactly a burn deck. It's a very weird deck. It's between burn and mid-range. Next up is Thud, and now this is a very, very funny card in this deck because sometimes this can be a bolt, or if we have Lightning Skelemental, if we play Lightning Skelemental, swing in, deal 6 damage, make them discard 2 cards. Well, at that point, the game's basic. Like, unless they've if they let it go through, that means they probably don't have things to block it with. And if they let it go through, the game is either you've already lost it or they've already lost it because they can afford to take it or they can't afford to take it. But then, even more so, if this gets in, that's 6 damage, then you Thud to sacrifice it to deal 6 more damage. And so Thud is in here for a way to get extra value out of all of these creatures. Awakener is kind of weird, but the other ones, namely. And so you can bring it back with Thunderkin Awakener, so you can be able to swing in with this, and then be able to cast Thud to sacrifice the creature. Next up is Unearth, and I actually have this as a 3 of, and then paired with a 1 of called Death Dweller, and I'll explain that. Unearth is able to return a creature with mana cost 3 or less from our graveyard to the battlefield, and the reason we want that is because that gets any of our creatures, and we just want to be able to, hey, 1 mana, you're going to take 6 damage. So that's one of the reasons we have this in here, paired with Call of Death Dweller, which says 3 mana, so it's more mana. Return up to 2 target creature cards with total mana cost 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Put a Death Touch counter on either of them, and then put a Menace counter on either of them. Now, the reason why you want to do this is because this is able to get multiple of our creatures back from our graveyard, but even if it only gets 1, the only creature in here that would only get 1 is Skelemental. And if we give that Menace as well as Death Touch, likelihood is it's not getting blocked and it's going right through. So unless they have removal, they are going to probably die if we grab this. So Call of Death Dweller's in there, but we only want it as a 1 of because really we're going to probably be prioritizing Unearth. We have enough Reanimate where we can play 3 Unearth, then 1 Call of Death Dweller. But the thing to keep in mind is that with these cards, they stay on the battlefield unless they say sacrifice. So Harbinger and Thunderkin Awakener will stay on the battlefield while everything else will get sacrificed. But quite often that doesn't matter. When I was playing this deck, it really was, okay, you play one of these and it's essentially a burn spell. But sometimes they can deal 6 damage instead of 3. And then with Death Dweller, it was just a very powerful card, but I don't think I want to go above 1. Next up, we have Collective Brutality as a way to discard our spells, discard our cards. So there are other sack outlets, but this goes on theme with what we're trying to do. We're trying to prevent our opponent from doing things, and Collective Brutality is very powerful in a burn and aggro dominated format. So especially now with burn and prowess being the top decks, Collective Brutality is amazing. And we can discard our spells and then bring them back with Unearth, Call of Death Dweller, or Thunderkin Awakener. So if we do this, if we play it like this, turn 2 Thunderkin Awakener, or even turn 2 Collective Brutality. Let's do it like that, so there's less chance of them removing it. Turn 2 Collective Brutality, discarding Lightning Skelemental. Turn 3 Thunderkin Awakener, swing in, deal the 1 from Awakener, deal the 6 from Lightning Skelemental, dealing 7 total, and then you cast Thud, because that's your 3rd mana, and then you'll deal 6 more. So what that'll do is it'll be 13 damage on turn 3. And likelihood is they probably used fetch lands and shock lands up till that point. Because if you don't, like, maybe you Harbinger on turn 1 to make sure that you can get that Awakener. They're probably not thinking, like, on turn 1, they're definitely going to fetch if they have it. But the moment they see this whole thing with Thud, they're going to get very scared. Especially since they probably lost life from their own lands. Next up is Light Up the Stage, and in here it might seem a little weird, but it's actually so powerful because with 20 creatures and 20 spells, it's actually like we're fitting perfectly 20 creatures, 20 spells, 20 lands. It actually worked out. It kind of worked out that way, strangely. But Light Up the Stage, most of our stuff will deal that damage. Like even Collective Brutality doesn't deal damage, but it's life loss. So all of those things allow us to trigger Spectacle, and Spectacle can just allow us to have some pretty big turns. Next up are our lands. We have Ether Hub because we don't really, like, we need to be able to have like black or red on turn 1, and after that we don't really care a ton about that dual color. We do have Lightning Skelemental, which we can play, but quite often what you'll see is you'll probably end up discarding it. But Lightning Skelemental, don't be afraid to play it. It's a very good card. If we were only planning on discarding it, we would be running more discard outlets. Next up is Blight Step Pathway, which for the playset is 1440. I love the pathways so much. I still have yet to pick them all up in person. I really want them. Next up is Dragon Skull Summit. We have people might argue with me on Dragon Skull Summit because I only have 8 cards that'll untap to. But really, Dragon Skull Summit does its job perfectly. I had no problem with it. You might have a problem if you have like Pathway Summit in your hand or Ether Hub Summit in your hand. But all you have to do is, like, you know what, just skip your turn 1 play. Like, if it's an Inquisition and it's absolutely crucial, go ahead, play the Pathway, and then have no turn 2 play. But really, we can play where that enters tapped. We don't really care. It seems like a very aggressive deck, and it is, but like this is one of those aggressive decks where we don't mind it enters tapped. Next up is our sideboard, and before we get there, if you like this list, let me know below, and leave that thumbs up. It really means a lot, and hit that subscribe to know when I am coming up with new content. And honestly, I really enjoy doing this. If you guys have any suggestions or ideas for decks, let me know. I love seeing super wacky decks. This deck was actually, someone's like, wait, but what if we did like Graveyard Shenanigans with Hellementals? And I was like, bet, okay, let's try it. And so here we are, and it's a really cool deck. And so if you have any ideas, let me know below. You can direct message apparently on YouTube, which I discovered last night. So those are really cool things you can do. Just let me know if you have any ideas. And back to the sideboard, we have Duress. If we need any other ways to discard, especially against Tron, where Inquisition won't really have an effect. Not a huge one. But we do have that 4th Inquisition and Kozilek in our sideboard because we do actually have the budget for it. But we don't want it in every matchup. We bring this in against a matchup that is going to be very aggro based. Next up is a Braid for artifact decks, but we have the ability to also double it up as creature removal because like this between Smash Smithereens in this style of deck, a Braid is more of what we want. Ingrath's Rampage, choosing one, target player sacks an artifact, creature, or planeswalker, and we make that decision of what they sacrifice of like the type, but not what they literally sacrifice. So let's say they have a Teferi Time Raveler, though, we can make but that's their only planeswalker. We can make them sacrifice it. So things like that, or big planeswalkers, big creatures, just a lot of stuff. As long as they only have one of it, that's what we bring this in against. Roiling Vortex against control and combo decks, and also Hammer Time, just anything that, or Prowess even, anything that doesn't pay for their spells and anything that tries to go for a long game, we bring these in. Blood Suns as a budget Blood Moon, and honestly, we don't really care that it's like I almost prefer this card. It draws us a card as well as doesn't make our mana suffer. We are not that good against Blood Moon, so Blood Sun is very, very nice. And a single Boil. Boil can be used in several matchups, being Control or Titan. It's just, this is one of those decks that can run it. I'm going to be honest, this is one of the decks that can run Boil. There are a lot of decks that try to run Boil that just can't, but this is one of them that can. And it honestly, as a one-of, does a lot of work, especially with Light Up the Stage. Anyway, let me know what you thought of this deck below, and I had a lot of fun playtesting and building this deck, and it went through a lot of variations, so really tell me what you think below, and I will see you next time.